Hello, everybody, and welcome to OpenExO Live. Really great to be with you. It's evening for me. Maybe it's morning or afternoon, wherever you are in the world. So this week, we have with us Mike Lingle. Mike Lingle's coming in from Florida. And you can see on the screen there, we have some amazing community members coming up in the next 8 weeks as well. And so before we get Mike up on stage here, I do have just a few comments from community members that they've shared about Mike. And the first one comes from Fernando, and he just says, I've known Mike Lingle since in 2018. We participated in the FTI Fast Track to help Miami solve its mobility problems. Mike was instrumental in the team's victory in that challenge and proved to have a rare quality of both technical expertise and business acumen. Mike is a serial entrepreneur and always brings interesting insights to the conversation. We then have from Jabin, Mike Lingle joined the ExO ecosystem as a high-performing local team member during the Miami-Dade County Fast Track on mobility and transportation. He was a key contributor to the success of the project and the outcomes. Since then, he's gone on to demonstrate his versatility, creativity, and entrepreneurial mindset as a valued community member in various projects and in core team roles within the ecosystem. He is always willing to step up and lead, helping and developing others along the way, and sharing his connections openly to amplify all our efforts. Next is Francisco Milagres. I had the opportunity to work with Mike when he led the growth efforts at ExO Works, and we always had very productive and straightforward meetings. I'm sure we will have a chance to work together shortly, and I'm looking forward to it. Then we have Kelsey, who said, Mike is an energetic entrepreneur with the ability to provide deep insight from his years of experience. He has extensive practice on how to implement exponential innovation to emulate the world's fastest growing companies, and is able to deliver this information with his phenomenal presentation skills. Mike is also a terrific leader who creates significant, lasting impacts within companies and on their employees. And then lastly, Eric Patel just says, Mike is one of my favorite new colleagues from the ExO community, whom I'm learning from a lot. Whether it is his entrepreneurship, startup, or pro forma financial advice, Mike brings a treasure chest of business experience and acumen to help small business owners thrive. His mindset, disposition, and service to others make him an ideal advisor and friend. I'm looking forward to following Mike and seeing what he has in store for us next. So with that, I'd like to say, welcome, Mike. How are you doing there in Miami?
I'm doing really well. I'm doing better after reading all for the last 5 minutes. That was really nice. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who contributed to that little presentation. It's great.
Perfect. So, and you can see a few people just saying hi there on LinkedIn, Rodrigo and Karina. If you are, you can ask any questions, no matter where you are on either of the platforms that you're on. And so please do that. But Mike, we always start off asking folks just to give a bit of background about yourself and what brought you to the OpenExO community.
Sure. And first of all, I want to congratulate you on 50 episodes of LinkedIn Live here. This is great. This is really, it's amazing. You've been doing this for, it sounds like exactly a year now.
That's right. So we took a 2-week break in December, so 52 weeks.
That's good. You deserved the fireworks. I like the fireworks at the beginning too. Okay, so I am a serial entrepreneur. I started as a software developer. Pretty quickly started, found myself switching from a developer role into entrepreneur. I'm running a business role, and started a few different companies. All of them were presentation apps. So basically trying to compete with PowerPoint, which is kind of a weird thing to do as a startup, but that's what we did. And we found a niche. Our first customer was the Discovery Channel. So when you watch these television networks, they have teams out selling the ads that you see. And so they wanted presentations that looked like television, but were editable like PowerPoint, and that they could control. Because you have this problem if you're selling ad space and you have 100 salespeople, they all have different presentations, they all have different information. But if I'm Discovery, I want to only show the right numbers, the right price, the right research, the latest information. And so I want to have some control. And if you can tell by my gray hair, this was before we had easy access to the cloud. So there was actually some engineering involved in making that happen.
Oh, wow.
So I did that and did a few different iterations of that, and finally brought in a partner and raised some money from a venture capital firm for a Series A. We moved the whole thing to the cloud sort of early in the life cycle of Amazon Web Services, like 2006, 2007, 2008. Raised the first round of VC right at the end of 2008, 2009. Raised a second round of VC, and that company was eventually acquired pretty much exactly 10 years ago. And since then, I've been working with other entrepreneurs and startups, trying to help them avoid some of the mistakes that I made while I was learning on the job. And a few years ago, I've run a few accelerator programs, and a few years ago, through one of the accelerator programs, Salim used to hang out at that accelerator, and I started running into Salim at the coffee pot, and he just pulled me, as he does, he just pulled me into his world, and all of a sudden I was full-time at ExO Works, basically taking the exponential methodology into large companies. So switching from that startup mindset into, okay, we're a global 1,000 company. How do we innovate successfully, right? Because there's a lot more at risk here, and it becomes a lot less about resources. Like if I'm a bootstrap startup, it's a lot more about resources. If I'm a large organization, it's a lot more about politics, right? And like, what can I get done inside the organization? So I had a great few years, really focused on that sort of large company innovation problem.
Yeah, wow. So I mean, that's a really, really great story, and I actually didn't know about the presentation company. So that's pretty cool. And so, I mean, as you say, I mean, you seem to have quite a passion around startups, helping startups. Does your personal MTP live around that sort of realm?
Yeah, it really does. So in the ExO world, we talk about MTPs, massive transformative purposes. And when we're trying to create a world-changing startup, the startup needs a massive transformative purpose, because that's how you really drive that kind of global impact and exponential growth. You get people excited. Things like Google index all the world's information and make it accessible. Facebook used to be connect everyone on the planet until that created some problems, and now they're more responsible about their connecting everyone on the planet, in theory. But those kind of things attract people to you both internally and externally. They also repel people who will waste your time, right? So it becomes a way that you can build the community. And personally, my MTP is exactly what you said. How can I help innovators who have these big visions turn them into reality, right? And for me, it's that marriage of vision and business that is really where the magic happens, and where you can actually create impact. Because if I sit around and have big visions all the time, I'm not going to have that impact. And if I sit around and think about business all the time, I may not be thinking big enough to have that impact. But really, my MTP is around marrying those two, right? Enabling those big visions to actually have that impact.
That's amazing. And so you've worked on a fair amount of like ExO projects.
Yes.
Would you like to tell us about some of the things you've actually learned and seen that you can share?
Yeah, definitely. And a couple of my favorites. One of the projects I worked on, we did a fast track sprint with the city of Miami to try to solve traffic, which was one of my favorite things. And the way these sprints work, you have like it ended up being 14 weeks because there was a hurricane. But basically, you have a short amount of time to try and even understand what the state of the world is in this area. I didn't know a whole lot about traffic before I got involved with the project. And all of a sudden, we're like meeting with the city of Miami, we're meeting with the traffic commission, we're talking to private developers, like we're getting all this different information. And then the idea is to come up with the solution, right? Ingest all this information and come up with something exponential. And what we came up with was a reward system. So you earn points for not driving alone, right? And then we kind of hit that. So we won the competition, which was pretty exciting. And then we hit that implementation phase, right? And then nothing happened for a year. And this is the piece that I think is the complicated piece. Like we had the vision, we knew the solution, but we couldn't implement. And then Salim found a company in Toronto that was actually doing this. They had come up independently with the idea for a reward system, and he introduced us. And we pitched them on, look, you're already doing this. You raised some money. You've got some tech built. Let's take what you have and marry it with all the momentum we've built in the city of Miami, and let's launch this thing in Miami. So that was a company called Velocia, which was great. I actually got super involved with them and was helping run the product for a while. And then COVID hit, and it turned out that was the solution to traffic. You just needed a global pandemic, and everyone stopped driving. That wasn't even on the whiteboard when we were sketching things out.
Now,
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was actually going to say, I see Rodrigo here on YouTube has asked the question, and I'd like to jump into it now because it's to do with startups, and he's just saying, with all the knowledge you have in leading and creating startups, is there something that you would have done differently in your early days? I don't know if you're saying about not going gray, but
yeah, right. Stay young. Yes, and I'm actually trying to. It's funny. Someone told me a few months ago that as entrepreneurs, we start companies to solve problems our former selves had. And the problem I had was I was a good developer, but I was not a good business person, right? So what that led to was we actually started growing. We had these customers. So once we had Discovery, we sold to all these other cable networks. We sold to CNN and TBS and TNT and Cartoon Network and some of the NBC properties. And like all of a sudden we had all this business. We were hiring people. We didn't actually raise any money in that iteration of the company. And then again, with the gray hair, I'm old enough that the .com crash hit. So all of a sudden the media world imploded, the tech world imploded, the whole world stopped. And we realized only at that moment that we were out over our skis, right? We didn't actually have enough money in the bank to keep paying people's salaries. We looked healthy on paper, right? Because we had all these contracts with these big companies that were supposed to be paying us, but they stopped paying. So we were waiting for money that we were owed. And it was hard to sell new business, and we had been living off of cash flow that we no longer had. So within a couple months, my partner at the time and I found ourselves laying off 3/4 of the company of these people who were terrific, right? They had done nothing wrong. They were excellent. We just hadn't planned appropriately. And fast forward to now, in the past couple of years, I've become very obsessed with the problem of entrepreneurs start companies, right? I had this vision. I've got this ExO canvas. I figured all this stuff out, but how do I actually run the business, right? And a business is based on numbers. It's based on finance. I'm not necessarily a finance person, but I'm going to need these skills, and I'm going to need to be able to look ahead and plan ahead to not just to raise money, but to hire people and responsibly make decisions that affect other people moving forward. So the thing I would have done, which I'm trying to make easy for other people now, is figure out get at least some proficiency with the business part of the business and the finance part of the business, because that's that's going to make or break the company, right? How much cash I have in the bank is how I live or die as a startup.
No, absolutely. And we'll definitely come to what you're doing now a little bit later. And the next thing I wanted to just ask is, I mean, you've worked on a number of projects around ExO. What is your sort of favorite part of ExO, like the ExO model, the ecosystem? What really is your favorite?
Well, first of all, the community. I mean, just the fact, I mean, we were just talking about this. Like, I took your phone call the day you came in, and now you're like the center of the community. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's really cool. The connections I've made and the quality of the people who show up into the community. So that's definitely my number one thing here. The Another of my favorite things is the bigness of the vision, right? And I think like I grew up as a hotshot programmer and I could solve any problem with tech. And then I had this exit and started working with other entrepreneurs and I kind of lost that magic. You know what I mean? Like I was helping other people and they were sometimes thinking big, but maybe not big enough. And I sort of lost that like, we can really have this huge impact. And one of my favorite things about EXO is just the bigness, right? Like we're going to 10x, we're going to affect 1 billion people. And not just having that vision, but coming up with a real methodology to do that, right? And that sort of reawakened in me this like this thing from my 20s that was like, oh, we can solve any problem, right? Like we can solve traffic using a reward system. Let's do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we actually can solve, I mean, all probably all the problems. I guess some of the problems are really tough and need really interesting solutions. And so, you know, what would you say are some of the sort of most successful EXO projects you've actually seen your time around the community?
Yeah, and I have a two-part answer to this. I have seen so many amazing ideas on the EXO community. Like there are just some stuff that comes out of the sprints that I'm like, oh, that makes a ton of sense, you know? And so I love that layer of it, right? And it's kind of the same reason I liked living in New York City. I lived in New York City for 20 years. Just the raw fire hose of ideas that I saw was amazing, you know? And it really got my own creative juices going. I think there's a second layer of like which of those have actually been successful, right? And that's the hard part is taking that vision and marrying it with actually creating something that has the kind of impact that we know it's capable of, but we have to get from here to there. And one of the most successful projects I've seen, one of my favorite people to hang out with in the community was this guy named Tony Saldana, who worked at P&G for 27 years and was the CIO of Gillette and like really had some chops. And he's retired from P&G now, but in his last 3 or 4 years, he built an incredibly effective innovation engine inside that company. And he did it at the headquarters. So everyone else, when they build innovation teams, they try to get as far away from the headquarters as they possibly can. He did it in the headquarters because he realized his job was to change the company culture, right? So he needed to be in the headquarters in order to make that happen. And actually, when I talk to him, like when you talk to him, one of the first things he'll tell you is he built this idea factory, right? So they would come up with ideas, they would workshop the ideas, they would pilot as many of them as they could, and they would kill them quickly if they weren't working, right? So he was kind of merciless about the timelines. And his idea was to create as much volume as possible and really run this like a venture portfolio. So have as many startups going as he could.
Yeah.
But the number one reason he had to kill pilots, even when they were working, was company culture. He could prove the idea would work, but P&G corporate wasn't ready to actually implement the idea. But his projects were some of the most, this innovation factory was one of the most successful engines of innovation that I've seen inside a large organization. And the crazy part is he was focused on optimizing the back office. So it's like the least sexy part of the business, right? Like, you know, we're thinking like flying cars and like whatever. And he's optimizing like payroll and supply chain and logistics. But he would only look at a project if he could drive a 10x improvement in the performance. And so he was able to very quickly create a portfolio of working projects that delivered hundreds of millions of dollars of value to P&G. And it was just a crazy innovation engine. I was really impressed by what he was able to put together.
No, absolutely. I mean, I can remember chatting to Tony in New York, actually. It was, I don't know, it was pre-pandemic for sure. And just chatting about the idea of digital transformation versus exponential transformation and exponential thinking, and just him saying how within that corporate world, people just say, well, let's just digitize the process we have now. And him saying, that's not what we need to do, because we can be so much more efficient if we act, but sometimes that's all you could do, right? Was digitize the process, and you got benefit. You could have got much more benefit. But anyway, it is always he is such an interesting guy. That's definitely for sure. And you've said many times whilst we've been speaking today about the fact that, all of these initiatives that come out of sprints, or whether it's startups, at the end of the day, they all need a functioning business model, right? So something that's going to make them survive. And I think that what you're working on right now is really about the financial side of things and keeping it surviving. So can you share a little bit about what you are working on right now?
Yes, and I love working with startups, right? That's my favorite thing. And again, I think lots of people have the vision and are creating products, and I can definitely provide some help there, but lots of people have that under control. I think that finance piece is super important. And for startups, in the ExO sprint, we get a business model canvas, right? So you create this business model canvas of like what you're offering, what your unique value proposition is, who your customers are, what your customer channels are, what your revenue is, what your expenses are. And the next step is to translate that into an actual financial projection, right? So if I'm thinking about what that financial projection should look like, it should have whatever the key drivers of revenue are. So if I'm a marketplace, how many transactions are being done on my marketplace? How many buyers are there? How many sellers are there, right? Looking out 1 year, 2 year, 3 years in advance, here are my assumptions. That should drive the revenue. That should drive the cost structure, right? So I'm paying for hosting services, an office, lawyers, accountants, right? All of that is growing as my business grows. That also is driving headcount, right? Like I need people to support that growth. And then the bottom line is the cash, right? My startup, as we've discussed, is going to live or die on cash. So what is the cash flow and how do I plan for that? And if I'm going to do this the way this plan is, do I have enough money to do it? Do I need to raise money? Do I need to raise, I need to ask my parent company for money if I'm an entrepreneur? Do I need to borrow money from a bank? Right? Like, what is the plan? What are the assumptions? Let's discuss them. Let's workshop them. And what I'm trying to do is make that as easy as possible right now, because it's hard for people, right? Like, you need a good template. So I've created a super flexible, comprehensive template that does a lot of the work for you. But one of the things it's really good at is letting you workshop different revenue models, right? Like maybe I want it transaction-based, but maybe I want it subscription-based, or maybe I want both. Right? People come in through the transactions, but some of them upgrade to a subscription. Like I've made that really easy as you're in the exploration phase. And then there's an education piece that goes along with it. So one of the things that, I come from a presentation background because I did presentations all my life. And in a weird way, I was like competing with PowerPoint, and now in a weird way, I'm competing with Excel. I don't know what my obsession with like Office, competing with Microsoft is, but there's like an education piece, and it's really hard to explain numbers and spreadsheets and finance to people without them just completely like either melting or falling asleep, right? So trying to embed just enough education into the product, and also, sessions I drop into accelerator programs all over the world. You need just a little bit of finance. You don't have to you don't have to work on Wall Street, but you got to understand a little bit. Like finance is the language of business. So let's learn to speak at least the basic language. And then when you're staring at the spreadsheet, like, what numbers do we put into this thing? What should the assumptions be, right? Like just a little bit of that. So it's this combination of having the right product and a little bit of on-demand education that allows people to quickly create their financials, present confidently, and also create the mental map, right? Like people come to me often because they're raising money. So they have an emergency, like I have to present this financial projection to the investor. But really what we want to do proactively is sit down and figure this out ahead of time, right? Like I'm starting a business, great. Let's from the business model canvas, let's immediately jump into the financial canvas and figure out how to make this a real workable thing, right?
Perfect. And so who is it that you are actually working with? You mentioned accelerators. Is it who is it?
So it's been really funny. It's a lot of early stage startups. So I work with idea stage, seed stage, series A, and then usually by series B, people, these startups either have a fractional CFO or someone inside the organization who can handle the financial piece. It's a lot of first-time founders, some second and third-time founders, a lot of people who don't understand finance, but some people who do just because they don't want to build a spreadsheet. Like this thing has taken me 5 years to build, so it's not easy. But then I'm also getting pulled into much larger projects, right? Like I've got this corporate innovation background. So I just, and one of the things when you talk to Tony Saldana about his innovation factory, the financial projections were one of the first things they did after they came up with the idea, right? Like, let's run the numbers and see if this makes sense.
Yes.
And so recently I've been hired by large companies. So I got hired by a division of Google that's spinning out of their Google X labs, right? And the first thing they do after they come up with the ideas is figure out the financial plan, right? What do the numbers look like? How are we going to do this, for fundraising, but also just for mapping this thing out and figuring out how to grow it. So this stuff is important for any size organization, whether you're bootstrapping, raising money, or an entrepreneur inside a big organization.
That's really awesome, Mike. And at the end of the day, like I think you've seen, there's so many people out there with really good ideas, but also really good implementation of that idea, but not on the financial side. On the business side, perhaps, or and finances is really what is going to make you cut it. So really cool to be working on that, and taking that experience that you've had, right, and putting it to good use.
And it's really cool working with, like, I work with all these startups and everyone has these great ideas and some of them succeed, but it's also cool dropping into a company like Google where they are literally talking about science fiction, like they are doing some of the coolest stuff, but they're marrying it to the business stuff, right? They are business people. They're going to figure out the finances. And it's like ExO. It's this marriage of science fiction with let's build a real business here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mike, thank you for coming and joining us. The time has really run away. It's been great chatting to you. I haven't actually spoken to you in quite a long time, so it's really been great. And as you say, I mean, I think you were probably the first person that I actually spoke to coming into this community. So. Thanks so much. Anything you want to leave the audience with as you head off to your afternoon?
Yeah, I will say there's a question from Nikki. How do you envision ExO Works moving the community and mainstream to blockchain and cryptocurrency like the Exos token? And there is a token that's at the core of this ExO community, which ties into the one thing that I'm obsessed with are security tokens. So what security tokens are is if we take all the crypto that's working around regulations and trying to get outside of the monetary system, if we flip the script and say, what happens if we build crypto that represents real assets and is SEC or regulatory compliant, right? We can actually digitize money, certainly, currencies, but we can also digitize stocks, we can digitize bonds, we can digitize titles to real estate, we can tokenize all of these things, and we can make them smart, right? And it's the equivalent, we are at the moment where this is just starting to happen, and it is the equivalent of turning all of our CDs into MP3s, but it's an even bigger opportunity because we're going to digitize like all of the financial markets all over the world. So security tokens are really the thing I am obsessed with at the moment. Hi, Salim. Good to see you.
Perfect. So, Mike, we'll chat to you again soon, I'm sure.
Yes.
And fantastic chatting to you today. And I hope that you have a wonderful afternoon there.
Thank you. You made my afternoon wonderful with all those nice comments at the beginning. That was amazing. Thank you. That was unexpected, and I really appreciate it. So,
always a pleasure. We'll chat to you again soon, Mike.
And congratulations again on 50 episodes and the fireworks and the whole thing. I'm excited for you.
Thanks so much. Cheers,
Thank you.
Bye. So that was Mike Lingle. Always great chatting to Mike. Do go check out Rocket Pro Forma. If you are a startup and you're looking for a better way to manage your finances, we're going to end out today's call just with a quick video about our foundation certification. If you are new to ExO and you want to just get an understanding of what it's all about, go check out our foundation certification, and we'll see you again next week.